Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to Price Action Trading Masterclass, right? So for today, we will be doing mainly starting on price action and also running a few setups. This is also a continuation from where we left off previously, right? So from last week's setup and also the concepts that we covered last week. So we will be using them for today's session. We will also be showing a few setups and looking at how we can combine these concepts. So for those of you guys who just joined us, right, a very warm welcome. I'll be putting the questions chat. I'll be leaving the questions chat as well as the Q&A box open as well. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to put them under the tab, right? If you guys have any analysis or any charts that you want us to look at as well, please feel free to put them under the questions chat. Okay, so with that, let's get the session started, right? So how we will do today's session is that I will be going through a summary of what we have covered for last week's session, going through the few key concepts, and then we will be hopping onto the charts to see if there are any setups available. Right, and if you guys have any questions, right, do put them under the questions chat. So just a quick introduction of myself, right? Okay, I've got your question further, right? Let's take a look at US 100. Okay, so yeah, we'll take a look at US 100 in a while, right? So I'm Lee Sing, right? So I'm part of the team that's recognized by the Technical Analyst Awards as finalist for the best FX research, right? So we do webinars on a daily basis, right? So I do cover them on Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. So if you guys have any questions with regards to the content posted on Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, right, please feel free to reach out to me either on LinkedIn or if you're here with us live right now, right, do put your questions under the tab. So before we get the session started proper, right, just a quick disclaimer, the information presented here, it's not to be treated as investment advice. It's for educational purposes only. So this is the agenda we will be covering for today, right? So first, I'll run through a summary of what we have covered last week in terms of looking at supply-demand areas, key concepts, as well as understanding how the fractal nature of markets can be applied across the different time frames. We will also take a look at supply-demand zone. So this is really the backbone of all this analysis that we do, right? And then we'll also take a look at risk and trade management concepts. So this will just be a brief run through of what we have covered last week. So in terms of understanding market structure, we covered three types of market structure: uptrends, where prices are forming higher lows and higher highs; downtrends, where prices are forming lower lows and lower highs, right? And also a ranging market, where prices are basically moving sideways. So in these three examples that you saw over here, you can see that what it's the key main or the main takeaway from this, it's that we have a general assumption that when the trend is in a downtrend, it's going to continue until there is a change in market structure. Likewise, in an uptrend, right, the uptrend is going to continue until there's a trend in market, there's a change in market structure. So that's the assumption that we carry along when doing the analysis, right? And then in a ranging market, what we want to understand from this is that when price comes into a resistance area, for example, right, in order to see if we could, so for example, in this example, right, so when price taps into a resistance area, we want to go on to the smaller time frame and essentially see if there are any supply areas that are starting to gain control, because what this then shows us is that this low itself that pushed price into this low that pushed price into the resistance itself, it fails to break the resistance, hence this low would be a potential target. So that's just something to keep in mind, right? So if we're trading within the range, another way you can trade this is essentially to wait for a breakout, so a break and close below this key support area or a break and close above the key resistance area in order to play a further move. Okay, and then also in summary of what we have covered in last week's topic, right? We talk about market structure. So we covered the three different types of market structure. We also talk about the concept of weak lows and strong highs and strong lows and weak lows and highs as well as strong lows and highs, right? Understanding that in an uptrend, the highs are constantly being taken out. So the highs are weak, they are potential targets, and the lows are expected to hold in a downtrend. So once price fails to form a new high, what it first suggests to us is that this low itself would be a low that it's targeted and we could see the low being taken out. And then we also covered supply and demand areas. So essentially understanding the concept that when price interacts with a zone, it tested, for example, a supply area over here, and then it fails above this area, it then creates a demand area, right? So we took a look at the weekly chart on euro dollar in this example. And then what we also covered on is specific zones, right? So when you are taking longs, for example, right, on the market structure, on the bullish market structure, the extreme, the last candle, right? So when price comes into test this demand area over here, again, we want to go down to the smaller time frame and essentially see if there's any reversal in order to take the long in line with the higher time frames direction. And then finally, on the last part of this chapter, right? I mean, the previous week's chapter, we actually covered on risk and trade management. So risk management, it's understanding that in each trade, right? So all of this is on probability. So we don't want to risk more than 2% on each trade. And also understanding the idea of risk to reward concepts, right? So the higher your risk to reward, so if you go down to the smaller time frame, you can get higher risk to reward ratios, keeping the stop losses tight. In this case, right, we want to understand the higher time frame direction and use the smaller time frame as entries in order to take these trades. So the tighter we can keep our stop loss, the higher the risk to reward ratio, right? So which means that if you have, for example, a risk to reward ratio of 5, by risking 1%, when price hits your target, you can gain 5%. So that's the general idea. So we also covered on smaller time frame entries, right? So we showed a few examples on how we can take the trades of smaller time frames and also waiting for confirmation based on structure. So this is a brief summary of what we've covered so far, right? So right now we will just hop onto the charts and we'll take a look at US 100. If you guys have any other requests as well, right, do put them under the questions chat. So let me just bring out the chart in a moment. Okay, so let's take a look at US 100. So as always, we want to start from the higher time frame first. So you can see, let me just remove anything that's not within this chart, right? So let's do a fresh analysis. So in this example, you can see that on the weekly time frame, prices are in a bearish market structure. You can see how prices hold. Within this, right, you have lower lows and lower highs being formed, this area over here. And the general understanding is that the price would continue on its downtrend, and any pullback within the zone itself, right, when price comes into a supply area, it's just to continue the downwards movement, right? So basically, on the weekly time frame, you can see bearish market structure in terms of lower lows and lower highs being formed. If you were to mark out the lows and highs, this area here. What's also interesting to note is that the key levels that we have, right? So you can see that based on the key levels itself, just highlighting support resistance areas, this would be the support area. You can see this zone. Okay, and how we will determine this as a support area is because you can see how price tested this region. So ideally what we want to look for in support resistance areas, right? Just looking at it graphically, we want to wait for key or significant rejections of this area. So an example of how you can see this, right? So one of how we can take a look at this is that you can see price pushing up into this zone and this sharp reversal below this area. Right, so this is one, and then following which price broke above and we tested this region, right? So it broke and closed above this region on the weekly time frame. You can see here, represented by this bullish candle, price breaking and closing above this gray zone, which is the resistance area, and then retesting this level as a support, right? So if you're on any breakout strategy, a breakout and then a retest of this before it continues on the upside. So which is why I've marked this region out as the support area. Okay, so having marked this out, right, what we want to do next is again try and find if there are any key levels that's in line with this area. So what you can do with this, so this is where Fibonacci retracement comes in, right? So all these concepts that we've covered. So the idea is to find a low and a high, right? So identify a swing low and a swing high. So in order to use Fibonacci retracement to find support, we want to start from this area here and end off at this area. So basically taking a Fibonacci retracement of this move, right? So I'll turn on the magnet mode because it helps me to capture the reversal points nicely. The lowest point and the highest point. So you open up key levels, you can see in this example, right? So this case itself, you can see that prices are currently sitting on the 61.8 with the 78.6. Okay, so this is the area. So there is no Fibonacci retracement that lines up with this area, but you can see that the current level that prices are sitting on right here, this region, this is the 61.8 Fibonacci retracement, right? And along with that as well, you can see that if you take a look at the movement of the candles, you can see this consolidation here. So this area. So again, right, so price pushed down, and also this candle itself held within the wick of the previous candle before we see that push up. So this would be another demand area to watch. So this is just on the weekly. What we're trying to do right now is to mark out key zones, understanding why are prices reacting off this levels, right? So you can see this is a demand area. We have another one over here, which there isn't any retracement levels that line up, so that's fine. Right, let me just remove the unnecessary ones. So we have these two levels. You can see that currently prices are sitting on this demand area, and how we can tell that as a demand area, it's because of how the candle reacted here. So this is on the weekly time frame. If you go down to the smaller time frame, you can see the consolidation. So let me just focus on this portion of the chart, right, just to see this area here. So same thing, right? So if I were to zoom out on the bigger picture, you can see that this is basically the consolidation, right? So this is what we marked out on the weekly time frame. If you go down to the 4 hours, you can see that this is an area where price consolidated. So the idea of consolidation is price moving sideways, right, respecting both the support resistance areas before it continued to the upside. And when you're on the weekly time frame, you can see that the weekly zone itself marks this area out very nicely as a candle that basically held within the previous wick before the break. So this is the demand area. So that's on the 4 hours, right? Let's go back to our daily time frame. So on the daily time frame, you can see, having marked out these zones, right? The next thing that we want to mark out on daily would be, again, right, supply demand areas. So if you take a look at this area itself, again, just looking at this candle, right? So let's now focus on this portion of the chart, this area. So anywhere from the right of this level onwards. The reason why I picked this area is because if you just take a look at market structure, you can see that this is basically the last high that took out the low, right? So it broke the low. So in terms of structure, you can see that this is the last leg of the move, and these are the pullback that we're expecting here. So the idea behind this is that when price comes into any of this resistance area, right, it can be any one. So we'll mark out the supply zones first, but the idea is that when price comes into this supply areas, right, we could see a further push down. So right now, what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to focus on this portion of the chart, and I will be marking out any supply zones that we have, right, within the leg of this. Okay. So let's take a look at that, right? We have another question, right? And giving an outlook on cable. So yes, let's take a look at pound dollar in a moment. Okay, so in this case, right, let's see this, right? So over here, you can see that it's basically the supply area. So what I'm trying to look for within this leg itself on the supply zone, it's basically trying to find if there are any key supply areas that price came into. So let's first mark out the supply areas, right? And we'll take a look at how prices react here. We have one. So basically this area here, you can see that there is this demand. So again, if you take a look at this, right, you can see that there is this demand, this candle here. So this, you saw this consolidation, and this candle basically held within the wick of its previous candle before that failure. So this is a demand, right? Understanding that when demand fails, it creates supply. So there is demand, and when demand fails, it creates supply. So this is one candle, one region that we have over here. This is one, right? The next one that we have, you can see over here, it's this area. So this region, basically the extreme of the smooth, and then this area as well. Here. Okay, so these are all the daily zones, right? Basically the daily supply areas or resistance zones that we can see. So currently what we have over here on the daily, it's that we can see that price came into this region, right? And right now it's forming some kind of pullback. So what we want to do next is to zoom down to this region. Okay, so having understand that, okay, we saw this consolidation and price coming in to basically push into this region. What we want to do next is to see if there are any areas, right? Or what's basically understanding what's going on here on the smaller time frame. So let's go down to the smaller time frame, right? So before I go down to the smaller time frame, what I do want to highlight is that this area itself, you can see that just looking at it on the daily time frame, we have this area here. I will mark out this horizontal level, this area, right? And the reason why I mark this out is because you can see how price came in, tested as a support and then as a resistance. So this is looking at support resistance areas. You can see in line chart as well, a very clear area where price respected this region twice. So this is one, right? If you want to look at supply demand areas, right, same thing. It's the last candle, right? You can see this candle that held within the zone before that failure. So this would be the demand area. So depending on how you want to mark this out, right, this is basically the picture on the daily time frame. Okay, so with that, let me just delete this. So you saw that it can be marked out in line chart or in terms of this area here. So this is the picture on the daily. Now let's go down to the 4 hours time frame. So currently on a 4 hours time frame, what we're seeing here, you can see that in terms of market structure, on the 4 hours, you can see this is the last low that's being formed, right? So if you look at market structure, you can see very clearly price push into this resistance area that from this low. You can see this area over here, right? And then what we have following which is that if I were to mark out this area or this horizontal line, you can see that this is the lowest point, right? So if you're on the 4 hours time frame, you can see that essentially what happened, this is the lowest point. So this is the last low that was being formed, right? So price essentially pushed up, came into this region, pushed higher, and then right now price came in, it sweeps this area, right? But it fails to close below. If you take a look at it on the 4 hours, you can see that price did not actually close below the support or the low here, right? So you can see this area. So price didn't actually close below this area. It just sweeps it before it continues to the upside. So right now, in terms of the highs and lows, right, this is the last high that we have over here. Okay, so in terms of 4 hour structure, you can see that this is basically what we're seeing. So the idea behind this is that if we can see on this area, right? So if on the smaller time frame, we see that demand areas are starting to gain control, starting to push higher, but this tells you is that price could come deeper into this high over here because this high itself is weak as it fails to take out the low. Okay, so again, right, if we see this market structure and we see this new high being formed, and over here you can see that price fails to break below this low, right? It just sweeps below this low. What we want to do next is to go to the smaller time frame. So this will be either on the 1 hour, the 30 minutes, or even the 15 minutes to see if there are any areas, right, where demand is in control. Once that happens, right, what this tells us is that we can play longs, short-term move targeting this high here. Okay, so this is on a 4 hours picture. So let's go down to the 1 hour picture and see what we have. So you can see currently on the 1 hour, right? On the 1 hour, the 30 minutes, you can see pretty clear bearish moves here. So in terms of the moves, you can see again, right, lower lows and lower highs being formed. You can see this structure. So bearish market structure. So what we want to wait for, it's a confirmation of this new high being formed and then failing to take out the low before it continues to the upside, right? Then we can take a long position. So that's one. The other one is, of course, price could just continue, right? This could just be a pullback before price continue to the downside. So there isn't anything much on the 1 hour, right? Apart from what we found in terms of the market structure. So this is basically it, right? The bearish market structure. So within the 1 hour, this is the last leg you want to look at. The idea is that as long as price holds within this low, within this high itself, any pullback here, it's just continuation for more downside. Okay, so right now what we want to do is focus on this portion of the chart. So again, we have to narrow it down, right? So anywhere to the right of this chart. So on the 1 hour, right, let's see what we have here. So there isn't much on the 1 hour that we can take a look at. You can see this region, right? So what I'm trying to do is that I'm trying to find if there are any supply areas that we can target or if there are any zones that price entered into and we could see that reversal. So you can see that on the 1 hour, the nearest zone that we have is this region. You can see this area here. Okay, so again, you can see how price consolidated before that move. So this would be one supply region to look at. So price consolidated before that strong push down. So this is one area to look at. So the idea is that when price comes into this region, if we see a reversal on the smaller time frame, we can play a drop here. So this is one, right? In terms of, let me just go down to the 30 minutes again to see if that's anything that we can actually test, right? So this is one area. There's another area over here, right? So on the 30 minutes is clearer. You can see that this bar here. So the supply region, right? So essentially price holding within this region and then breaking this level. Currently, what you're seeing over here on the 30 minutes, you can see that there is also a short-term ascending channel that's being formed. You can see this area, right? So prices are just pushing higher, right? The move up here, to be very frank, it's not very convincing. You can see this area, and then of course there is this support level that's being respected here. You can see this level, right? Price testing as a resistance and then rejected, testing this level as a support. So I think we could see a short-term upside coming into this region here. Okay, so this is on the 30 minutes time frame, right? So we've highlighted this area. You can see that in terms of demand supply as well. In terms of the 30 minutes time frame, if we to zoom in here, right? So focusing on this portion of the chart, you can see that over here, this is the demand area on the 30 minutes time frame. Right, so again, how do we determine that, right? This is basically the candle that's still held within the region. you can see that it still held. Let me just change the color, right? You can see this area. So this candle over here. So price tested this region. On the 30 minutes, it held within the wicks before that break, and right now prices are retesting this region. So I think as long as price holds above this demand area, it's also in line with this ascending channel, right? We could see more upside. This would be the most immediate 30 minutes resistance area to target. So this area here. Okay, so this is on the 30 minutes time frame. And then same thing, right? How do we know if this 30 minutes is going to hold, right? So price came in to this 30 minutes area over here. We saw that rejection. So in order to ensure that the 30 minutes is going to hold, we can go down to the smaller time frame here. So it's just going through the different time frames. So you can see on the 30 minutes when price comes into this region, what you have over here, right? Let me just go down further. You can see this area as well. So coming into this region, you can see the structure being formed, right? So price essentially coming down, testing, forming your equal lows, right? Right now it's just hovering within the range. So as always, right, we want to wait for a break above the range. You can see that currently it is testing the support and resistance areas here. Right, you found the 5 minutes, you can see this area, right? So price respecting both this region. So what we want to wait for over here, it's a clear break above and then a retest of it as a demand area before playing the upside. So I think we could see more short-term upside, but currently this area itself, if you take a look at it on the 5 minutes, there's no clear structure. Okay, so the most in the 5 minutes, right, wait for the break of this resistance area for more upside, right? When price taps into this area, this is the M30 supply region, right? So I think this is one area to watch out for. So this is my view on US 100. This is on the 5 minutes, so it's a shorter term move, right? But if you don't want to go down to such a small time frame, what you can also do is just go to the 30 minutes time frame, right? So take note of this resistance areas here, this resistance zones that we have, right? So essentially when price comes into this area, right, what you want to do is again go down to the smaller time frame because this is still bearish move. You can take a look at it on the 30 minutes, the 1 hour, you can see that there's still bearish move coming down over here. And what we have, it's also price testing this supply area on the higher time frame. So this is my view, right? So when price comes into this area, right, we can again go down to the smaller time frame, see if there are any short opportunities, right? So on that pullback, if price comes into an area and you see supply starts gaining control, what this tells you is that this low itself that caused the pullback on the higher time frame is a weak low and it's a potential target. Okay, so this is my view on US 100. Right now, it isn't in a really nice level. You can see that prices are basically moving sideways on the 5 minutes. Okay, let's take a look at pound dollar. So again, I'll just remove all of this, right? And we'll do a fresh analysis. So you can see on pound dollar, just remove this. So again, we start from the higher time frame first. So on the higher time frame, if I were on the weekly or the monthly, you can see this area, right? So essentially pound dollar broke a key support and resistance area. Over here, you can see this region. Even if you put it in line chart, you can see that this is an area that price tested multiple times as both a support and a resistance. So nothing much on the monthly, right? The levels don't change much. Over here, it's currently testing this region, but that's pretty much, right? And then if you go on to the weekly time frame, you can see over here, right? So on the weekly time frame, we have this area. So again, support and resistance area. You can see this is the candle that's still held within the zone. So if you take a look at it on the weekly, you can see that this candle held within the wick of the previous candle and then that failure. So this is the supply region on the weekly. So you want to label this as the weekly supply region here, right? So coming into this region, essentially what we have here is that we have this weekly supply. We have a demand area here as well. This is the weekly demand. Again, right, if you take a look at it in terms of line chart or even in terms of just seeing how price react here, you can see that price pushed down, tested this as a resistance, pushed lower, and then the acknowledgement again before going higher. Just looking at the colors of the candles. If not, if you take a look at it in line chart, you can see very clearly as well this move and then again over here. Okay, so these are the key levels to watch here, right? So this is on the weekly, and if you're on the daily time frame, you can see that essentially, right? So what we have over here is that price came into a resistance zone, this region over here, right? So again, you can see on the daily time frame, if you take a look at market structure, you can see bullish market structure going into this area. So again, if I were to trace out just looking at the colors of the candles, you can see higher lows and higher highs being formed. Okay, so like this, or if you take a look at the close, you can see as well, right? So mark out the highs and lows, you can see this region. It's also testing a support area here. So if you look at support resistance areas, you can see that on the daily time frame, it's still testing the support area here. So this is on the daily, and you can see this region as well, right? So basically on the 4 hours, you're pretty much seeing the same thing, higher lows and higher highs being formed, and then this area, basically as a resistance turn support area. So this region, essentially. So my view on pound dollar is that on a 4 hours time frame, it's still testing a support area. We could see more upside here, right? So what I want to look for ideally in the 4 hours, you can see there isn't any clear structure, right? On the 4 hours, this is the last low that we have, right? So essentially this region, anywhere within this region itself, I would say that it's still sitting on a support region here. So if I take a look at it on the 4 hours, the 1 hour, right? So you can see on the 1 hour, so the same concept apply. The candle that has still held within the wick, you can see this is the demand area, and this is where prices are currently testing. So this is the demand region. You can see on the 4 hours, it will be a resistance then support area, which is basically this area here that we saw, right? If you are to mark out supply and demand areas, right, specifically based on particular candles, you can see that this, in this case, right, this is on a 1 hour time frame, is still sitting on this demand area here. So my view is that on the short term move, right, we could see a clearer structure being formed. So it's still more bullish move up. So what we want to wait for, right, if we are expecting a further push down on the monthly, given that prices are sitting on a resistance, what we want to wait for is clear structure to be formed either on the 1 hour or the 4 hours to tell us that basically price coming into a resistance or supply area, and this low fails to form a new high, hence it's a wick low targeted, right? And we can play the shots. And in this case, right, it will be in line with a higher time frame. So if you're seeing the 1 hour right now, you can see that prices are still respecting the demand area that we have over here. Even if you're to check the Fibonacci retracement, you can see that this is the last push up before that pullback. So again, Fibonacci retracement taking the lows and highs, right? So we want to take the lows of this move and the highs. So low to high, you can see this area, right? So in line with the support resistance level we've highlighted, it's also in line with the 61.8 retracement. So this is on the 1 hour picture. There isn't any smaller time frame that we can go to. Something interesting to note over here, right? If you go on to the 30 minutes time frame, I would say that this is very small, but this is there's an idea for this, right? So essentially over here, you can see that again. So it's the same thing, right? Marking out supply demand areas and trying to understand where prices might be heading. You can see in this case, right, this is an example of where we have. You can see that this is, again, on the M30 minutes, this is the candle that held within the wicks before that push down, price came in, tested this region over here. So this is on the M30 minutes. You can see that in terms of the structure here, this is basically the last low. So what this also tells you is that if on the smaller time frame, prices start respecting the supply region, what it tells me is that this low itself, right, could be weak because it fails to form a new high. If you take a look at structure, you can see that this is basically what we're looking at right now. So this is the last low and prices are coming into a resistance area. So if on the smaller time frame, this can be on the 5 minutes time frame, for example, you see supply starting to gain control. What this shows you is that this low itself, the low that basically push price into a supply area, it's a weak low, right? And it can be a target. So that's something else to explore. Right? So if you take a look at it, I'll just mark this out on the 30 minutes time frame. Of course, understand that the smaller the time frame you go, right, the more whipsaws, and there's also a lower case, or rather, there is a lower case. So once price comes into this or target this low, right, and this low it's run, then you have to close out a portion of the position, right, and also manage the trade properly. So this is an example, right? So this is on the 30 minutes time frame. Now let's go down to the 5 minutes time frame so you can see the same thing. So on the 5 minutes time frame, in order to ensure that there is a bearish move, essentially you need to wait for a change in market structure. Right now you can see there's still higher lows and higher highs being formed. This is the last low that's being formed over here. So what you want to wait for ideally is a break of this level, the break of this low, for more downside confirmation here. So this is on the shorter time frame, right? This is on the 5 minutes time frame. You can see this level, right? So until the break of this low itself, you can see that prices are still holding above this area. So once price breaks this low, what this suggests is change in structure. Okay, so this is one area to watch, right? And then when price breaks this region again, right, this is your 15 minutes. So what you can target over here is the next 15 minutes demand area. So it'll be this region. Right, so you can see this demand area, essentially the candle that's still held within, again, before that push up. So this would be the most immediate target. Okay, so this is my short-term view on pound dollar. the longer term view is that prices are still sitting on a demand. So if you don't want to take any 5 minutes setups because they're so close, right, what you can also do is go to the 1 hour, right? So essentially this is the last demand area we've identified on the 1 hour. So if price breaks below this area, then if price breaks below this area over here, right, then we could see more downside. But as long as it holds above, right now we could still see more structure being formed. Okay, so even if you're to play any short-term move, understand that this on the smaller time frame is a demand. Price could respect this demand to push higher. Okay, so I hope that answers your question. Okay, I think with that we have answered all of the questions here, right? So this is the session, right, that we've covered. Yeah, we've answered all of the questions. So this is it for today, right? So as usual, thanks everyone for staying with us till the end, right? And if you guys have any questions or any specific topics that you'd like us to cover, right, please, you can either send your feedback to this chat, right? Or you can also send us an email. Okay, I have another question. So look like the market's waiting for Fed and US data to drive the market, right? Yeah, there's a high chance of that. Okay, so likely that it's going to be the case, right? So in November as well, Fed delivered another rate hike, but at the same time, they also talk about slower pace of tightening cycles, given that inflation could be easing, right? So October's inflation, it's actually lower than expected, I believe at 7.7%. But right now, we have Fed policymakers essentially saying that it's just once off, right? So it's not enough to conclude that inflation indeed is. But at the same time, right, because of slower growth and all the macro headwinds, there's also a chance that markets are essentially expecting rates or expecting the tightening cycles to be slower, right? So less aggressive on the Fed side. So yeah, and then we also have other data, right? So let's take a look at the economic calendar. So I'll just bring out the economic calendar, right? So we also have non-farm payroll data, which should happen on the first Friday of every month. So take a look at this, right? You can just go to vantagemarkets.com. So recently, dollar has been on a strong decline. So take a look at the economic calendar here. Okay, so we have the ADP employment change data as well as GDP. So these are the main ones. So these are the main ones for today. And then you have your pending home sales data and crude oil inventory data, right? So all this, the ones in red, basically are the ones with higher impact. And then on Thursday, we have Fed Chairman Jerome Powell's speech. And also, I believe on Friday, we have, Friday, right? So Friday here, we have speech by various policymakers, as well as non-farm payroll data. So so coming Friday. Okay, so yeah, those are the data that markets will be watching out closely for. Okay, so with that, I think we've come to the end of the session, right? We have no other questions as well. I hope the session is useful, right? So if you guys have any other feedback or you have any account-related inquiries, right, please send them to support@vantagemarkets.com. And then for schedule, right, you can also reach out to vantagemarkets.com/webinars. I mean, to check the schedule and the speakers. Okay, so thanks everyone, right? Stay safe, trade safe, and we'll catch you guys again tomorrow.